You know, the great thing about fantasy football, you never know who is going to go off and have a huge game. And sometimes a player does nothing and then has a big game the very next week. But really, when it comes down to it, it's all about the matchup. That's what determines who's going to boom. So we're going to look at our favorite matchups, some players in great situations. We're going to tell you why they're good and why they definitely should be in your lineup. Now, before we dig into the stats and the matchups, here's a stat that might shock you. Almost 70% of all our viewers on this channel are not subscribed to Fantasy Endgame. I'm not sure why. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button. It takes 1 second. It helps us out. And look, that is why we're here to help you win in fantasy. Help us get to 100,000. We're almost there. I know we can do it. First player who feel like can help you big time in week 4. It's a player who might finally arrive, and it's Omarion Hampton, rookie running back. We've been waiting for all of these rookie running backs to do something, right? Like these guys you drafted early, you've been waiting on them, and now he's got the chance. Obviously, Najee Harris is done for the season. I mean, so Hampton's backup right now is Hassan Haskins. All right, this is a journeyman. This is just a guy. Let's face it, it's Hampton's backfield. This was the only concern with Hampton, really, was going to get enough touches. Not only is he getting all the carries now in this backfield, and now all of a sudden in week 3 alone, with Najee out for the second half of that game, we saw Hampton get 6 receptions. This guy might all of a sudden become a monster even in full PPR leagues. And look, the numbers weren't great, but he did have his so far season / career high 70 rushing yards, 3.7 yards per carry. You feel like it's just going to get better, right?
Yeah, I do feel like it's going to get better, and it's probably going to get a lot better this week because they get the New York Giants. You look at this New York Giants defense, yeah, they're okay against the pass, but man, do they struggle against the run. They're allowing the 2nd most rush yards per game right now. They're also allowing the 5th highest yards per carry at 5.23 yards per carry. If that's not enough, how about the 2nd highest yards after contact per attempt and the 13th highest yards before contact per attempt? So this is certainly a game where we could see Hampton build off what he did last week. And you talked about it last week, the best he's looked as a runner this year. I'll bet he looks even better this week. And if that's all not enough for you, the Chargers are also currently huge 6.5-point favorites right now. And I don't think Jackson Dart is the solution for the Giants as far as, winning this football game. So this should be a game where the Chargers are in control, running the ball late in the game, leaning on Omarion Hampton. I really do think this is going to be his best game of the season so far.
Yeah, that game you feel like game script definitely going to be in favor of the 3-0 team, not the 0-3 team. Good for a running back. It's funny because this next pick, I feel like the Broncos are going to be clear favorites. They should have a pretty easy time against the Bengals, despite the fact that their records are flipped. Broncos are 1-2 and the Bengals are 2-1. It doesn't feel that way. I have a feeling things will correct themselves, and that's why I know we're both high on J.K. Dobbins this week especially. Look, I know I was a little skeptical how long Dobbins will last. I mean, we will see as the season goes on. I'm still big on R.J. Harvey, but it's going to take some time because Dobbins has looked great. And in fact, what's interesting is that Dobbins is getting better as the season goes on. His rushing average right now in the season is 5.4 yards per carry, and it's gone up every game so far. And he's going to get the ball because, let's face it, even if the Bengals aren't as miserable as they were last week, it's not good, right? We already knew the defense wasn't good. This offense now is a train wreck with Jake Browning. And so, again, I feel like don't look at the records. Look at the fact that this Broncos team should be better. This Bengals team is going downhill. Dobbins will probably get the ball even more. The efficiency is already there. And, we don't have to worry about R.J. Harvey, at least not yet. Dobbins, we thought was being some sort of like a timeshare here. He's 18th among all running backs in terms of team rush share. And that's not something that we expect. We thought he would be way down there, maybe even 50-50 split. That percentage, by the way, it doesn't sound great, 18th. That's more than guys like Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and James Cook. Yeah, he's getting more of his team's carries. And now he gets the Bengals.
Yeah, now he gets the Bengals. This is an absolute smash spot. You look at it on the season, you say, they haven't been that bad. They've only allowed the 10th, 12th most rush yards per game. They're only 13th in yards per carry, but that's because they got the Browns in week 1. Remember, this was a Browns team with rookie Dylan Sampson and Jerome Ford as their running backs. Look what's happened in the last 2 games. They're allowing the 3rd most rush yards per game over the last 2 games and the 4th highest yards per carry at 5.31. They're also ninth highest in terms of yards after contact per attempt. That is something J.K. Dobbins has thrived on pretty much his whole career. And they're allowing the second highest yards before contact per attempt. And you talked about it. Yeah, the records are flipped, but it feels like the Broncos are the much better team, and Vegas agrees. They are massive 7.5-point home favorites. It would be shocking if this game was even close, to be honest here. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to take it a step further with J.K. Dobbins and just saying he's going to help win your matchup this week. I think he's going to help win your underdog pick'ems as well. Right now they have him at 59.5 rushing yards. He's gone 63 or more rushing yards in every single game, and now he gets the Bengals. I'm taking the higher on this for sure. You pair that with that new customer special, Caleb Williams. That's an easy win right off the bat. Just make sure when you join Underdog, you use promo code ENDGAME, because not only is that going to get you a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000 of bonus cash, but also when you play $5, you're going to get $50.
Well, let's go even further. There's another player in this matchup that we think could have another big game. It's a guy that, again, shouldn't have doubted last week, Courtland Sutton. And there were reasons to doubt. Bo Nix, even after last week, still has not been all that great. In fact, PFF thinks he's been the worst starting quarterback in the game so far, but it's only been 3 weeks. We know he's not this bad, right? He has time to get better. And so we're in on Courtland Sutton doing it against the Bengals defense. We'll talk a little bit more about the pass defense in a second, but look, a lot of people freaked out after week 2 because Troy Franklin, that's it. He's the number one guy there. He's taken over. Why would he take over when Courtland Sutton has been a solid number one receiver for this team as long as he's been there, really? And yeah, Franklin will still get used once in a while. There was never a threat that he was going to take over Courtland Sutton's role. And so Courtland Sutton reasserted himself as the guy last week with a big game. Overall, so far this season, top 25 in targets total, right, with 21. But what I like is the fact that he's getting those deep targets. Out of all the guys who have more targets than him, only 3 have a higher ADOT, that's average depth of target. His is 13.2. You want those targets that are down the field, not those little dink and dunk targets that are like 5 yards apiece. It doesn't do a whole lot for you in fantasy. Sutton gets quality targets, and now he has, let's say, a less than quality defensive opponent.
Yeah, I mean, we're picking on the Bengals here, but for good reason. Like we picked on the Cowboys last week. There's a reason why we pick on this defense. Is you look at the Bengals right now, they're allowing the 6th most points to wide receivers, but the 7th most points to outside wide receivers. We know this is where Courtland Sutton lives. Also, I talk about these coverage shells a lot. They play single high, the 3rd most in the NFL this year. You look at Courtland Sutton this year, he has a 0.22 targets per route run versus non-single high coverages, a 0.28 targets per route run versus single high. Why is this important? Well, Ryan Heath, who does a lot of great work over at Fantasy Points, did research on this, and he says, in matchups against a defense that plays at least 63% single high rate, players with at least a 10% better targets per route run versus single high hit 20 plus fantasy points 17.1% of the time. That's approximately a 35% better ceiling rate than all players across all matchups. So no, it's not guaranteed that a guy is going to go off, but everything is pointing to Courtland Sutton going off this week again against this Bengals defense. I mean, if you have Courtland Sutton, you're probably not benching him anyways, but you should be feeling very, very good heading into this matchup.
All right, now a receiver who, despite being solid all year, I think some fantasy owners might be doubting after only caught 3 passes last week. That Raiders offense does not look great, to be honest. Jacoby Myers, right? You might be wondering, is there enough ceiling here? Do I start him? Like, his offensive line is a mess. Even Ashton Genty can't do anything. That's all true, but you still need to start Jacoby Myers. Look, that 3-catch performance, he still managed 63 yards. His 63 yards was his season low so far. He's averaging a career high 76 yards per game, and that's not a coincidence because he finally has a good quarterback in Geno Smith, which he's been missing, of course, and the Raiders are still passing the ball. Again, Ashton Genty owners don't want to hear that. All right, that's a different story. We'll talk about Jacoby Myers right here. He's clearly the number 1 receiver on this team. Do not make that same mistake. Remember what I just said about Troy Franklin and then Courtland Sutton? Guess what's going to happen this week? Trey Tucker is not going to take over as the number one receiver for this offense. It's still Jacoby Myers, right? That is just one of those things that happened. Like, Trey Tucker might still be involved here and there. He's not the number one guy. He's the number two guy. All right, it's Jacoby Myers. He is right now tied for 15th among all receivers in targets on the season. He was getting a massive target share before last game took that dip. And honestly, the Raiders haven't really had a super easy schedule in terms of the defense on the other side, but as you probably could guess, this week it's a pretty good matchup.
Yeah, pretty good matchup against the Bears, who are allowing the second most points to wide receivers, even though last week they got to face the Cowboys basically without CeeDee Lamb for the entire game. But what's even more encouraging here that I really like, they're allowing the third most points to slot wide receivers. Jacoby Myers playing about 66% of his snaps out of the slot. They've also allowed the most touchdowns to slot wide receivers at 5. So we could see Jacoby Myers get in the end zone this week. And then their good slot corner, Kyle Gordon, he's been out with a hamstring injury. His replacement, Nick McLeod, he's ranked 88th in terms of coverage grade by Pro Football Focus among all corners. Now, I will say there's always a chance this is the week Kyle Gordon returns. And if he does, yeah, it's not going to be quite as good for Jacoby Myers, but it's not going to keep me from starting Jacoby Myers. This is still too good of a spot. Not to mention this game, this could be one of those games. It's a sneaky high-scoring game. Vegas has this as the third highest over-under right now, the third highest total on the slate. And it's only a one-game spread, which means this is basically a pick-em, which means both teams could be scoring a ton of points. Neither of these teams have a great defense, so this is a game, another game want to kind of attack and target this game as far as big upside plays, and Jacoby could be one of those.
All right, now this one almost feels too easy to tell you start Garrett Wilson, but I know there's going to be people who ask, okay, well, is Justin Fields going to play? If so, do I trust anybody? Because, yeah, we remember exactly how bad he was in week 2, right? What if he's not all there? Look, it doesn't seem to matter because Garrett Wilson has been good every week with Tyrod Taylor, with Justin Fields, and despite the fact that this Jets offense itself hasn't really been great other than week 1 when they faced what apparently is a horrible Steelers defense. Look, Garrett Wilson is the pass offense. Like, he is it. Again, there's nobody else at wide receiver who's even making any sort of a dent here, and that's why Garrett Wilson is only behind Jackson Smith-Njigba and Puka Nacua in terms of team target share, right? It's a massive 33%. And his 48.5% air yard share is 7th highest among all wide receivers, right? It really doesn't matter. He's going to get targeted completely all season long, all game long. And so this week, it's probably going to result in a pretty good, it's going to be a monster week for Garrett Wilson, no matter who's at quarterback, because it's the Dolphins.
Yeah, it's the Dolphins. And you look at it on the season, they're only allowing the 12th most points to wide receivers, which doesn't seem great. But you got to look a little deeper here because in week 2, they played the Patriots, who don't even throw the ball to their wide receivers. I mean, they're rolling out Kayshon Boutte and a 32-year-old Stephon Diggs coming off ACL tear. Now, and then last week, of course, they faced the Bills, who, again, do not have an alpha number 1 wide receiver like Garrett Wilson. They spread the ball around, and they only threw it 28 times in that game. But go back to week 1 when they played the Indianapolis Colts, who do have a good number 1 wide receiver in Michael Pittman. What did he do in that game? 6 catches, 80 yards, and a touchdown. I think Garrett Wilson is a little bit better than Michael Pittman Jr., not to mention he is, like you said, the entire passing offense here. And outside of Rasul Douglas, who, yes, he's still a good corner, every other corner on this defense is absolutely horrible. Like, nobody even over a 50 grade, according to Pro Football Focus. Like, Garrett Wilson, I think if you or I were playing quarterback, Garrett Wilson could still have a big game this week.
Maybe too far there, but yeah, if I have Garrett Wilson, I'm not second guessing it. He's in my lineup. All right, now there's a couple players here who, we each have that gut feel about. There's some reasons you might worry, but there's also some reasons you think they could go off. So we're each going to pick a player we think absolutely could be a boom. Maybe click that boost button on Draft Lane and see if you get some extra points here. So go ahead and let's start with yours.
I'm starting with Davante Adams. I know it's easy to look and be like, man, Puka Nacua, just dominating here. But did you know, you probably didn't, Davante Adams actually has more expected fantasy points than Puka Nacua right now. He's just had to face, in week 1, this guy had to face Derek Stingley Jr., and then last week he had to face a ton of Quinyon Mitchell. Because look, Sean McVay's a smart coach. He understands in these matchups, like, look, Davante Adams is still a good player, but Puka's our guy. Let's put Adams on the outside, make him face those tough corners, and get Puka the mismatches. Well, this week I'm not worried about it. Okay, the Colts have a couple good corners, right? Like Kenny Moore, Charvarius Ward. They're not bad, but they're not on the level of those guys. And even despite the fact that Adams has had to face those 2 tough matchups, he's still the wide receiver 14 on the season in PPR leagues. Not only that, this guy is far from dust. I would argue he's still elite. He currently ranks 2nd among all wide receivers in separation score according to Fantasy Points. And he's tied for 1st in win rate with another old wide receiver, Mike Evans. So he's still playing at a very high level. But also what I love here is the way this Rams offense is. They basically only throw the ball to Puka Nacua and Davante Adams. After 3 weeks, the Rams lead every team in the NFL in terms of percentage of throws that go to the wide receivers. Of the 90 team targets, only 27 of them have gone to players not named Puka Nacua and Davante Adams. It's these 2 guys, clearly condensed target tree here. This is what we love to see for fantasy. And again, despite the fact that the Colts do have a couple good corners, I don't care. This Rams offense is a cheat code for wide receivers. Matchup almost hardly matters. These guys are not going to shut down Davante Adams. He could have a huge game this week, finally getting a break from these top tier corners. I think Davante Adams has to be in fantasy lineups this week.
So for some of the same reasons, specifically talking about a very condensed depth chart there, wide receiver, the target share, that's why I'm going to go a little bit out on a limb here and say I think no matter what, I'm still starting Drake London. And look, I get it. I understand. It hasn't been a great start to the season for him. And after last week, you're like, why should I start any Falcon in that passing game? Why start any Falcon other than Bijan Robinson? I get it. I understand it. We've seen a ton. Speaking of draft lane, on the questions, I have a lot of people asking, do I trade Drake London, right? Do I bench Drake London? No, I think that's a mistake. This feels like a get-right game for him and the team. So yeah, last week it was abysmal, right? Drake London has just been kind of mediocre for fantasy, but he's still getting exactly what you need to be productive, and that is a ton of targets, right? Even with Darnell Mooney back, Drake London is still among the league leaders this season in targets. 27 total targets, that's 8th among all wide receivers, and he is making the most of those targets. He's got a 0.27 target per route run rate. He's going to continue to get targets. That's first and foremost. Okay, now what about Michael Penix Jr. in this offense? All right, so you've heard the things like Zach Robinson, right? OC, he's coming down from the booth. He's going to be on the field, right? Magic wand solution here. Maybe not, but look, they're doing something at least. They fired wide receiver coach Ike Hilliard. Apparently he wasn't cutting it. So I don't know if getting a new wide receiver coach is going to make a difference here or not, but the thing is, they're telling these guys, hey, this is not acceptable. Something has got to change. We're not waiting till halfway through the season. The season is over or whatever. We're not going to accept mediocrity. So I like to see that. They're being proactive here. And Drake London doesn't need a wide receiver coach. He's already proven he's an elite receiver, right? Just needs to continue to get the targets. Michael Penix is not a horrible quarterback all of a sudden. Remember week 1 when he looked amazing? I don't think that all of a sudden he went from great to bad in the span of 2 weeks. This is a home game against, a not so great defense. Let's face it, the Commanders, they're kind of in the middle of the pack in terms of pass defense. This defense hasn't even been challenged. They don't even have an interception defensively on the season yet. As I mentioned in the start sit video, those corners, Marshawn Lattimore is kind of washed, right? Other guys here, nobody is going to shut down Drake London. I'm not worried here. So I get it if you're nervous, but I feel like this is going to be London's best game so far. Leagues where I got him, I'm definitely starting him. Speaking of those start sit videos, if you haven't checked it out for every position, we got you covered. So make sure you win in week 4. It's all here in this playlist.